We'll begin working on our animation using the pose-to-pose principle and build our 5 main poses of the story. But first, let's quickly check our scene setup. I hope you have your file open, Assignment Section 07. We need to have our workspace set to animation, because once we have our workspace set to animation, we should have the option to open up the graph editor. Our outliner should be opened as well. That is usually the way I work, but of course it depends on the situation. Sometimes you don't need the outliner, so you can close it to make more space available in your viewport. But for now, let's keep everything the way it is. Our character rig was divided into 2 separate display layers, so currently we won't be able to select its mesh because it was set to reference mode. And our controls are in their own separate layers so that we can hide them when we need to check the animation. Though it is a good practice to disable all the selectability options, except for the NURBS curves in any case, just be sure that you won't key the wrong thing by mistake. So that is usually the best way to work. We should have our auto key option turned on. Let's also quickly go to the time slider settings. Here we have our frame rate set to 24 frames per second, as well as our playback speed. We need to make one change in the animation tab preferences, so let's go there. And here we need to select a different option for the default out tangent and set it to stepped mode. Click Save. We will be creating the 5 main poses without looking at the computerized motion between them. That is why we need to work in a stepped mode this time. Let's shrink our timeline to 32 frames. And we are ready to animate. Let's double check if we don't have any keys left on our timeline, and now we can start. First, we'll build the 2 key poses of our animation, which is a sad pose and a happy pose. We will set them chronologically on the first 2 frames, so the sad pose will be on frame 1 and a happy pose on frame 2. That way, we will be able to quickly jump between them and check whether they are contrasting enough and whether they work well together. Let's start with the sad pose. It will be our usual process. We can start by bringing the weight down a little bit of our main body control. Let's spread the feet a little bit apart, not too much, so they're around shoulder width. One of them will be placed more at the back, the other more in the front. We can select them both and rotate them together, but you should remember that we don't want to have any twitting in animation, so the feet or the hand should not have the exact same pose on both sides. So later we can rotate one of them further to create a difference between them. In the sad pose, the hips will be rotated this way, so that our character's weight would be focused on the foot on the left. Let's rotate the hips to the left in y-axis so that the hips would be facing a similar angle than the feet are. The hips will also be rotated in as well, just a little bit. We don't want any body part to be rotated too extremely. We need it to be convincing. As always, don't forget to position the knees towards the direction that the feet are facing. All right, now the torso. It should be rotated to the left because our whole character is facing the left side. But the torso shouldn't be rotated as much as the hips are because we still want to have a little bit of stretch and compression on the sides. Because it is a sad pose, we want the chest to be leaning forward as if it's heavy. The head as well, and the gravity is pulling him down. The face should be rotated to the left as well. Now let's position the arms. They should be rotated down so that they're hanging low. We probably want them to have a more relaxed pose so we can bend the elbows a little bit, rotate the shoulders in. Usually, if we have one foot in front of the other, the opposite arm should also be more in the front than the other arm to create a balance. Okay, now we can position the hands. Don't forget the fingers. We can rotate them in to get a more relaxed feeling of the hands and position the thumb. Other hand as well. Don't forget to look from different angles. And zoom in to check if any of the parts are going through another part of the body. I think this pose is done. Let's select all the controls and hit the S on the first frame so that we save our pose. Now we can also hit S on the second frame and start repositioning the character into the happy pose. I know that the feet won't be moving. They will stay in the same spot, so I'll leave them as they are, and I'll select all the other controls at the top, and I'll zero everything out. Be careful and don't select the scale channels. Type in 0, and now you have our neutral pose at the top of our character, so it will be easier to position everything the way we want. I forgot on the first pose to position the weight of the body in other axes, so let's bring the weight now to the side so that it's positioned on the left foot, and the position of the x-axis is fine. I don't want to have our character's weight pushed back and centered at the back foot this time, because by leaning forward, our character feels more heavy and more sad. Alright, now we can go back to the happy pose. Here we know that we want to bring the weight to the opposite side. Let's also bring it even further to the front, because our character will be leaning back, so it will need to keep the balance. Let's move on to the hips and rotate them a little bit to the right. Our feet are still facing the left side, so we can't rotate the hips too much, but our whole upper body is going to the right, so the hips will be influenced by that rotation. The torso here will be going far to the right. Let's finish positioning the hips first, so let's bring the right side higher, and this time the hips will be rotated out to the back this way. Now we can move on to the torso. Let's rotate it down to the right and up this way. The head will be positioned up as well. We want our line of action to be going from the right down, which is the opposite direction than in the sad one. Here it was going from the left down. That is why I'm positioning the head to be rotated to the right. I think I've rotated my torso a bit too much, so let's bring it back. Okay, this looks better. We've looked from different angles, the main body shape looks fine, so we can start positioning the arms. Let's bring them up. We also want to have one hand positioned higher than the other so they don't look the same. Let's bend them a little bit. Rotate the shoulders in. We can bring the arms a little bit to the back. Now the wrists. The hands should be going back and a little to the sides. Let's zoom in and work on the fingers. We want them to be positioned to the opposite side than it was before, the thumb as well, so that the hands can have tension. Now we're almost done posing the character. We can check for the small details, and we can see that the foot on the left is no longer placed on the ground. It's floating in the air. So we need to bring the weight a little bit down to fix that. So that our leg won't be overstretched. While you have any of the controls selected, it doesn't matter which ones, and you have your keyframes visible on the timeline, you can jump between those keys using comma and period buttons on your keyboard, and that way you can compare the two poses. Okay, I think we're done posing the two main key poses. So in the next lesson, we'll move on to creating the breakdown poses.